Archives of Prasar Bharati presents the timeless treasure of Golden Era.
In Conversations tonight, my guest is a lady who's responsible for guiding and steering policies on higher education in India. She's been also director of the Tata Institute for Social Sciences and has a profound personal commitment to the training of young people to work in the Voluntary Social Work Center. I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Armaity Desai, Chairman of the University Grants Commission. Dr. Desai, when most people think of education in India, there's a sort of sense of despair that somehow the education system hasn't sufficiently delivered. There is the feeling that our best minds are as good as the best anywhere in the world, but the pyramid isn't large enough. Would you say that's a fair assessment?
Well, first of all, to put this in the numerical context, our higher education system appears very large, probably one of the largest in the world. But if you take it proportionate to the population in the 18 to 23 age group, we are one of the least. We have only about 6% of those who ought to be in higher education. So the actual potential for access is still extremely low. That's one factor. Qualitatively, yes, we have had problems because the actual numbers is very large. And given this factor, we have not necessarily kept up the requirements of access with quality. And we haven't reconciled these two issues. And because of that, quality has been one of the, let's say, factors which has been jeopardized in the process. But it doesn't mean that the whole system is wanting. I have very agreeably surprised because I visit universities and I see so many departments with very great interest in innovative areas, in challenging areas, doing new things, trying to find new ways of doing things. There are colleges which are doing the same. So we have gotten into the habit of self-chastisement in this country. We don't look at the good. We always want to see what's not so good about it. But we should be proud. We have some very good institutions in the country, and we do draw foreign students also to our university institutions. And when our students compete and go abroad and compete with counterparts in the foreign country, they don't do badly at all. They do well, which means that our system hasn't failed them. It does mean we have good quality people in this country. We do need to put much more into the system. Input will also determine output. Nation's commitment to education has to increase if we want something out of it, which is even more than what we are able to do, even with the little we get in the system.
I think there are a few people who quarrel with the idea that our best students, as you mentioned, are good and on par with students anywhere else. But if we were to look at a notion of the average student who emerges today, and at a time when the economy is expanding rapidly in industry and well, the infrastructures need talented young people, for example, personally, I'm not convinced that this whole myth of India's large reservoir of trained manpower is really an accurate one.
Well, there are several factors we have to consider. One is, let's take the infrastructure factors in colleges, which is the first entry point into the university system. It's really lacks considerable, equipment, library, books, things which are necessary for the foundational work which the college has to do. The college draws from the secondary school system and the primary school system. Both these systems have also not qualitatively kept up, with the result that at the undergraduate stage you may have to put in a lot more than what you would normally have to do, which means that you have to have that special type of input, whether it is remedial work or enough science equipment, things of that sort. Today, the state governments, which by and large maintain colleges, can barely keep up with the salaries of teachers. There's not much left for the infrastructure. So first of all, that's where the major problem arises. Second thing is we forget that we have a large number of students who come from ill-equipped schools. So even at that level, we haven't provided. So it's not the talent, it's not the potential. It is the kind of environment, educational environment through which they have gone through that has not equipped them for the kind of thing to bring them above average. Third factor which you should also bear in mind is that many of them are first generation learners. See, for us, access into education means social mobility. A number of students, I mean, a very large percentage of our students are basically first generation in the university system, and they have come from not private schools, school system, but they have come from the average school system, which the country provides. And as a result of that, you will also find its mark on the student. It's not the student, it's really the kind of educational environment we have provided that is not stimulated, that has not provided the kind of atmosphere the student needs for development.
How do you think, or where do you think we may begin to sort of initiate change? Is it just a question of the government writing a larger check, which is unlikely to happen given the sort of current political and economic climate?
Well, there are many things that even the UGC, the University Grants Commission, tries to do, which where I work. We have provided for a lot of other kinds of input, say improvement of teacher education, especially university teachers, because as you know, school teachers required to have a B.Ed degree, but that's not true for a university teacher. Somehow you're supposed to be a good teacher without any background whatsoever in teaching. So we have now introduced orientation programs for teachers who are new. We have a 4-week program for them. We have refresher courses for teachers. We provide a lot of other inputs, qualitative inputs of research awards of various kinds, allowing for teachers to take, say, a couple of years off their teaching and do research work, which again goes back into their teaching, we hope. So we have made these kinds of efforts. We have provided for frontline facilities in science area, because we can't give it to every college or university, as you say. Money is not there to adequately do this. So we have, for example, the Nuclear Science Center in Delhi, which affords a very good scientific facility for university teachers, scholars to come up and do it. We need to do a lot more work of equipping the teachers in the college, at the college level, and a lot of our academic staff college work is with the college teachers. We need to also have certain amount of staff development activity that university initiates on its own, which we would like to promote in the next few years, where they don't have to go to identified colleges, academic staff colleges, but the university itself should create that atmosphere.
What would you say are sort of some of the major obstacles or things that you have to struggle and contend with in achieving some of these sort of ideals that you've talked about?
Well, the one and major problem is the relevance of our education. Unless that is looked at and dramatically changed, the problems will continue. The dissatisfaction with the system, the community's expectations that the youngster who goes out of college then does something that is not being met by the system, and therefore the disaffection from the public, from the student. So even if you get good quality education, but if it's not relevant to society's needs, the individual's needs, it's going to create problems. So the major thing we really have to contend with now is to look at our major courses in humanities, social sciences, and in the basic sciences, and see in what way we can relate these to the application requirements of today. And this is the kind of thing that we are now engaged in looking at. We've had some discussions with vice chancellors also, and there's a general debate on this major issue. And unless we are able to dramatically change the meaning of education for the young, the involvement in the feeling of I have a stake in what I'm learning will not be there. You find this stake for students who go to professional courses. There's not that stake either for teacher or student in the general education, because it's looked on as general. Somehow it's not given the value of education for life. Education for life has three things in it. One is your role as a worker. second is your role as a citizen, and third is your role as a parent who will bring up your future country's generations. Now, these roles are we really working on in our system? We are not. And therefore, our system is a bit irrelevant, and not bit, quite irrelevant. And I feel this is I would consider the major obstacle to change.
You know, there's also the feeling that, you mentioned that only 6% of the people who should be in higher education in terms of relative numbers are there. Given the resource crunch and perhaps the justified feeling that more money needs to go into primary and secondary education, what kind of threats do you feel to the ability of the University Grants Commission to deliver on its agenda for higher education, and how are you going to sort of address and tackle these issues?
Well, one of the things we are suggesting, for example, is a better utilization of the present facilities. Colleges, for example, don't necessarily work 12 hours of the day. They work for a few hours and they're finished. Sometimes afternoons, evenings, the premises are not utilized. Why do we not have two sets of students to fully utilize the main cost is on buildings, on infrastructure, books, etc. With some additional inputs into the library, into equipment, etc., we might be able to manage a much larger number of students. Second thing is distance education. We need to put in such good quality distance education that people want to go to it, not because you didn't get admission in the conventional system, but because by choice you would like to go into it. So that's the second very big thrust we need to have. Third thing is, why do we need to have everybody in the conventional system going through it in the conventional form? Why cannot they take some courses in the distance education mode so that we accommodate more students on our campuses? Suppose we have one group coming in one semester, and the second semester, some courses which don't need teacher-student interaction can be done through the distance mode. And so in that second semester, another group comes into the campus. There are many flexible ways of working. We are very rigid. Our system is very rigid. And until those rigidities go and flexibilities move in, the structure will not be able to expand itself to meet the demand.
But when one looks at, say, a university like Delhi, which already has, 125, 150,000 students under one umbrella.
Yes.
I sort of hate to say this, but there are perhaps just a very few colleges where substantial teaching takes place. And I think that education seems to have, higher education certainly, in terms of teachers, for a lot of people, it's no longer, it's not the best and the brightest who go into teaching.
Yes.
And if I maybe sound somewhat sort of chauvinist and sort of sexist in this, it does tend to be that in a society where the male is still perceived as being the primary income earner, very few men of caliber want to go into teaching because there just isn't enough money in it for them.
Well, that's true, especially for those subjects where you get a better deal outside the system. If you want a good management teacher for management degree, and the salaries outside are so much higher than what a teacher in management, even a lecturer will be very little compared to just an entry point, management student, even on a stipend in industry. Naturally, your competition with the system is very high, and that's a dramatic change now. In the earlier part of this century, when education was so well regarded and you had very well-known teachers, it was because education was far better paid and had a status because of that to a large extent. Today, it has to compete with a market which is far more lucrative than the university system, and so some of the best minds want to sell soap and toothpaste. That's our misfortune, because we've lost them from the academia, and we're not producing. Therefore, it has its effects. Therefore, on the teacher-student, impact it makes. These are problems, but still, I wouldn't say that everybody who's good therefore seeks a market economy. There are many who shun it and would prefer the academic area where they can do research, where they can think, where they're not pushed by the forces, market forces, etc. So I wouldn't say that all don't do, but yes, we do have a struggle.
Do you think that we're likely to go the American way, where sort of higher education in India is largely privately funded and privately endowed, and how would you respond to that?
No, I think it's impossible. We have too large a system to begin with that no private party can really take on. It's not possible. Secondly, people are not interested in salaries, in things of that kind, painting your walls and repairing your equipment and all that sort of thing. Private initiative would be you want an extra wing in your university or your college, you want a new laboratory, or you want some equipment like computers. Private parties will come in to add on, and I think that add-on is fine. It should be much more promoted than it's being done, so that we can have much more public support for universities than we now have, and for colleges. So that we should promote in that sense. But to expect that we'll have numerous private universities and colleges, and that too for students who can ill afford to pay, because a majority of our students cannot pay those kinds of things, unless we provide for scholarships and other means. What we really need to restructure is our fee structure, so that those who can really afford to pay, and those who can't afford to pay, whatever money we are now spending goes into them. See, right now, it's not equity what we are doing, because we are really supporting all and sundry, even those who can well afford it. So those who can't afford it are not getting into the system because our money isn't stretching far enough. So the whole system needs a new type of equity, in which those who can pay should pay, and those who can't pay should be well supported. This is a system which we are wanting, which we should ask for in this country.
What do you think has been sort of the main obstacle or struggle that you've had to contend with in fulfilling what may be your sort of your ideal for the higher education system in India? Do you feel, for example, that the government has consistently not invested enough in higher education, has not prioritized it enough?
Yeah, that is the first and foremost. A lot of my time goes in trying to, argue for more funds, to make out a case for more funds for the university system. So I think the time that I should be spending much more on academic development of universities and colleges and doing much more of that does tend to get diverted, into that type of thing. We feel that basically education should be given a very high priority if we want development. Not only primary education is very important. I myself for 10 years was involved in this whole issue of wastage and stagnation in primary education when I was working in Bombay. So for me it's equally an issue. But I don't put one system against the other. I feel the entire system has to be re-looked at. And the nation must at least commit 10% of its resources. We're talking of 6%, but that will only take us to the year, say about the end of the next 5-year plan. But it is still less for us. 10% for a nation which is so low down on the in all the indices on education, whether it's primary education or it's adult literacy or enrollment in higher education at all levels. So we really need to take a very hard look.
Why do you think that in the recent elections, for example, in Britain and in several countries, policies on education and health become extremely important as a part of the political discourse
agenda,
and the positions of different parties? Why do you think in India, I sort of am personally amazed and despairing that nobody was talking about education
there's no agenda.
as a priority, and why we as a community, our national sensibility in a sense, lacks this awareness and emphasis on education. It's not just the politician, we don't raise it as an issue.
Yes. Well, it's a difficult issue. In the first place, those who are denied the best of education and the best of health facilities are not the vocal population of this country. The vocal population gets its health facilities, it gets its education from the best of schools, and therefore the non-vocal population which really is denied this is also the voiceless, people of this country. Let me say that part of it is that. The other part is the way we envision development. Development in this country has been very much envisioned on an industrial model. It's also been envisioned on high priority on infrastructure like irrigation, large irrigation projects, not involvement of communities in creating their water resources, which ought to really be our priority, but huge investments which don't necessarily reach those very people who need the water. Things like that, with the result that our priorities, the way they are, take up so much of our funding that the funds then released to education and to the voiceless, therefore, in this field. And I add to it the rural poor who don't necessarily get the fruits of all these development, programs that take place. All of these remain outside. And that's a huge resource that the country is losing over a period of time. And I feel we really have to look at what is development and what is sustainable development. We have to question this. And this questioning, those who belong to the system on the higher structures are not doing, because they are benefiting by what is happening. And those who are not benefiting and cannot make these kinds of, are not able to make these queries or push these queries, with the result that we are where we are with health and education. I don't know if I satisfy your answer, but basically I read it in those terms from my experience at the more grassroots level, that I have.
You were director of the Tata Institute for Social Sciences, which has a formidable reputation. And I think that your contribution in developing that was substantial. What was it like for you for managing an institution such as that? To coming in and interacting with bureaucracies and politicians and governments and trying to influence and impact national policy on a very substantive, significant issue. What has been your sort of struggle, perhaps?
Well, for one thing, I come from a very small system. The Tata Institute is deemed to be a university, it has a university status, but it's a small professional institution. And I'm coming into a system which is very large, looking at the whole country, not one institution, though naturally my work even in Tata Institute was not confined to the institution. It was looking at national issues and policies which impinged on development, and we were involved at the more national and even international level. So the question was not always a very limited one. But this has given me more scope on a national level. And I feel that it does give you a bigger challenge, and it's more exciting from that point of view, because you are really looking at the whole system and its requirements. Of course, you despair, you worry, you feel depressed at times, nothing can happen. Sometimes you feel very happy because you meet suddenly a group of teachers or a vice chancellor who are doing things, and you say to yourself, well, it's not all that bad in the system, we really have to look at it, And I feel that one of the things that I have met with now in the system is that, first of all, the system needs to be documented better in terms of what is happening. And only then the bureaucracy and the political persons who have to take very hard decisions will understand what the system is all about. So part of our failure has been in the system that we have not really made apparent what the system can do. That's our fault, I feel. On the other hand, yes, it is difficult to convince some persons who already have fixed notions about how things should be in education to begin to change it. But I have not had very difficult experience. I'm very agreeably surprised in a sense, because I've had very little political, none at all, I would say, real political interference or anything of this kind. Yes, people call me, I explain our problem and our position. In fact, most of the time I urge them to help me, to solve my financial problem. I say, you are in the position to do that. I am not as much as you are. And I try to get them to be allies of the system when I say no to them, because I have no money. And I have to say no if a person calls me and says, please do this or that, because I have to explain what the problem is, and I have to be judicious. I have to see that everybody gets funds, and I can't do things out of turn. But I do get them to understand what the issue really is and how they are in a position to do something. The bureaucracy has been wonderful. I have not had any difficulties with them. On the contrary, they've been extremely helpful to me. And in the last 1 year, I've had much more money given than in the last few years the UGC got, and it has helped at least the non-planned grants, which go to mainly central and deemed universities. And I hope that this year my planned grants also will be facilitated to meet at least the minimum commitments we've already made. We are not going for any new things because we can't make new commitments, but at least old commitments which are on ground, I hope that they will help me to fulfill. So up to now, I wouldn't say that I've had any major problem.
If you were to sort of be given three wishes, apart from asking for more money for the UGC to sort of achieve your objectives, and I was sort of, Aladdin sitting here, what would those sort of three wishes be?
Well, I have really one wish, and that is the major one, that students and teachers take an inward look at the system and begin to look at what they can do for it themselves. We're always asking others to do something for us, but we can do things for ourselves. The students themselves can look at what is missing and why is it missing, and what we can do as the group that is supposed to benefit from the system, what we ourselves can do about it. What are the requirements we should make of the system? Not requirements in terms of postpone the examination or, allow us to sit if we have failed, etc. I mean, I'm not talking of that kind. I'm talking of qualitative improvement, relevance, more, information which is up to date, state of the art, in the subject area. I think that is where the movement from the students has to come. They have to feel the urge, they have to grow with this urge and push the system towards that objective. I would like students to do that. I want teachers to look at what we are accomplishing, why we are accomplishing it, why what we are not accomplishing, and how we can do it still better within our resources and means which we have and we can use. So I want that very much to happen. And I hope that vice chancellors, who are the leaders of the system, can be selected for what they are as leaders and not for other reasons, which sometimes can impact politically on the system, in the sense that if the choice is made for reasons other than what we would expect of a vice chancellor, which is that he or she has to be the best of minds in the academic system, but also should have initiative, should have leadership qualities, should know how to interface with the public as well as with the university community. Now vice chancellors cannot be focused only on the university, has to be with the public. So if these three subsystems of the educational system were to come together and think together and work together towards the change in the system, I think the system can really marvelously change if we really want to put our heads together.
Dr. Desai, thank you very much, and all strength to you.
Thank you. Thank you.